Okay, so you got that? Modifiers are simply phrases that modify a noun. Let's take a look at a couple example sentences. Looking at the first sentence, it writes, "Walking quickly, I rush home." In this sentence, the words highlighted in yellow, which is walking quickly, are the modifiers. And the subject is right after the modifier. It is the word I. So that means I'm the one that's walking quickly. Walking quickly is modifying what I'm doing. The thing about modifying phrases is they need to be placed right next to the word they're modifying. Remember, when it comes to introductory phrases, modifiers are kind of like the money trail in a murder case. And if I learned anything from CSI, I know that if you follow the money trail to the end, you'll find the murderer. Same thing here. If you follow the modifying phrase all the way to the end, you always find the true subject on the other side of the comma. So remember, we always want to put the subject of the modifier right next to the modifier. Okay, so now let's take a look at the second sentence. It reads, "Handsome and charming, Alex is popular at parties." So kind of like the same deal as before, the first part of the sentence highlighted in yellow is the modifier. And the subject is the word right after the modifier, the word Alex. So it's Alex that's handsome and charming. Okay, let's go to the third sentence. It reads, "Quaint and lively, the little town is a perfect place to get away." You probably know the drill by now. The first part of the sentence highlighted in yellow is the modifier, and the subject is right after the modifier. So the little town is the subject, and it's the little town that is quaint and lively. So now you're probably thinking, hey, what's the big deal? Modifiers look pretty easy. And yes, they are. But let's take a look at an example of a misplaced modifier. Okay, so the sentence reads, "Quickly changing into his sneakers, Tom's dog dragged him to the park." I'll give you a second to think about this, but try to pinpoint what the modifier is and what the subject is. And then think about whether that's what the subject should be. Okay, got it? All right, so the modifier in the sentence is the first part again, which is quickly changing into his sneakers. And the subject of the sentence is right after the modifier, which is Tom's dog. But does that make sense? Would a dog really be able to change quickly into his sneakers? The answer is probably not. Most likely the author is talking about Tom changing into his sneakers and not Tom's dog. When you see a sentence like this, which really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, you're probably looking at a misplaced modifier. So how would you correct this sentence? Here's a possible way you would correct it. You could write, "Quickly changing into his sneakers, comma, Tom took his dog to the park." Okay, great. So now in this sentence, we kind of turn around the last part, placing Tom right after the modifier. So now it's Tom that's quickly changing into his sneakers. And that makes a whole lot more sense. On the SAT, we're always going to go in the direction of the more logical sentence. All right, you think you got it? Well, let's try a sample SAT question. I'll give you 45 seconds. Time's up. Ready or not, we're going to go over the answer. The correct answer to question 1 is answer choice E. The sentence reads, persuading even the most reluctant video game enthusiasts to spend hours playing. The effect of Blizzard Entertainment's War of Warcraft is to make the art of war fun. So what is the modifier here? The yellow highlighting probably gives it away. So now think to yourself, what exactly is persuading even the most reluctant video game enthusiasts to spend hours playing? Is it the effects? Or is it the game War of Warcraft? Probably War of Warcraft. That's what's making all these gamers spend all these hours playing. So now we know we want to shift this sentence somehow so that War of Warcraft appears immediately after the modifier. Okay, because that would make it the subject. And we want the subject right after the modifier. Scanning through the answer choices, I can see that only answer choice E correctly fixed this misplaced modifier. Okay, here's another question. I'll give you another 45 seconds to see if you can't knock this one out. And time's up. Question 2 is a tricky question because it's a twist on the traditional misplaced modifier. In this sentence, the misplaced modifier is actually at the end of the sentence. Ooh, you didn't know that could happen, did you? Well, it can. Although misplaced modifiers are usually at the beginning of the sentence, sometimes modifiers can pop up in the middle or at the end of a sentence, so you really gotta watch out for that. In fact, every time you see a comma in a sentence, you have to think to yourself, maybe it's a modifier. A comma is a clue that maybe a modifier is there, so definitely check that out if you see a comma. Question 2 reads, many of the household tools and items in use today were adaptations of equipment used in prehistoric times, particularly the hammer. You see, just reading that sentence, it sounds okay, doesn't it? It really does. Because this is the way you and I might talk. But you really have to watch out for these sneaky misplaced modifiers. In this sentence, particularly the hammer is the modifier. So now you have to think, what is it modifying exactly? What is particularly the hammer? Well, it's probably modifying household tools and items, right? A hammer is a household tool. We are probably not modifying prehistoric times because a hammer is not a type of prehistoric time. That just does not make sense. So remember, we always want to put the subject of the modifier right next to the modifier, whether the modifier is in the beginning of the sentence or the end. That same rule applies. So knowing that, I can cross off A, B, and E because those three don't fix the misplaced modifier. And that leaves me with answer choice C and D. And then answer choice C has a verb error. In answer choice C, we use the word was. Do you see that? Right after the comma in answer choice C, it says was an adaptation of equipment. But we're talking about plural items. We're saying many of the household tools and items. So therefore, the singular was is incorrect, making answer choice D the correct answer. So you see, this is definitely one of the harder questions because it's testing you on two errors, misplaced modifiers and verb errors. And that's all, folks, for misplaced modifiers. You think you're kind of getting the hang of it?